there's sort of a threshold distance that I call Crocs distance. And generally, I think Crocs distance is probably like a 2 to 3 minute walk. And there's this big drop off in basically how often we see people once they get out of Crocs distance. The biggest determinant of happiness they could find amongst the residents was, do you have a friend or a family member who's not your partner within a walking distance of you? And if you have one person, I think it increases your happiness on average by 40%. There's not that many things that increase your happiness by 40% out there. If you don't live near your work anymore, you now need to decide a new criteria for how you select where you live. And our claim is like, why not near people you like? Real estate is expensive, but coordination is free. How's that for a tagline?
The American housing market is broken, and Phil Levin thinks he's found a fix. Intentionally living near your friends. As co-founder of Live Near Friends, he's helping people achieve greater housing agency and higher quality of life by choosing their neighbors before they choose their neighborhood.
Most Podern.
Welcome to Most Podern, Phil Levin.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I'm going to jump in with something very small scale, but quite relatable. You mentioned to us that you think about living in terms of Crocs distance. Can you tell us what that is and why it matters?
Yes. So it's really a question of how close is close when you're talking about living near friends or really living near amenities. And, when different people will define close in different ways. For some people, a 15-minute drive is close. But what I've observed is that there's sort of a threshold distance that I call Crocs distance, which is the distance where you will just go somewhere without even thinking about it. You'll just throw on the Crocs. You don't care what the weather is like. You don't need to worry about if you have socks or it's going to be cold out, and you'll just run over. And generally, I think Crocs distance is probably like a 2 to 3 minute walk. We have friends near us in Oakland. We've got 30 friends that live near us at different distances. Some live right next door. Some live right upstairs. Some live a 15-minute walk away. Some live a 10-minute walk away. And there's this big drop off in basically how often we see people once they get out of Crocs distance. The second they need to think to themselves, what's the weather like? You've sort of lost them, right? It's like the frictionless distance.
Frictionless,
and so,
exactly.
Yeah. So actually, to plug one of our services, we have custom Live Near Friends Crocs that we make people, that we like sending people, because we think it's basically the perfect footwear for your walkable, highly proximate lifestyle, which is really the thing that we're promoting as a company.
Gotcha. Just full service.
Yes.
Concierge service there. Oh, wonderful. Well, you mentioned that you live near 30 of your friends, and I think many of those friends also have children. Can you walk us through what that looks like on the day-to-day and also how it all started?
Yeah. So we live at a place called Radish in Oakland that my wife, Kristen, and I started. And originally it was sort of 7 people. We bought a property with 2 buildings on it. It sort of has grown incrementally over time. And now 7 years down the road, we have sort of a central campus / compound with 6 buildings. There's 10 homes on it. And within sort of that central campus, there's 20 adults. And we've had 8 kids born here. Not literally born here. They're born in the hospital for the most part, but they've known nothing in their life but living here. And we've also sort of had this thing happen where a lot of people have sort of bought homes near us to sort of be walking distance from us. And they use us sort of as like a third space, almost community center. And so that's the community. That's Radish.
What makes it a campus rather than a bunch of people living right next to each other on the same block?
Ooh, it's a good question. Yeah, we don't give course credits, so maybe campus is the wrong word. But yeah, I think there's multiple spaces to be in, multiple things to do. You can have, somebody can be in the hot tub, somebody else can be in the yard, somebody else can be in the lounge, and all be sort of doing different stuff. So it allows for different group sizes and sort of different scales of gathering.
Do you find that there's a cadence to life that evolves when you live near friends like this? Is it formalized or is it something that happens more organically?
So there's 2 key moments in the day, which I think give the day its cadence. So the first is we do dinner together 6 nights a week, always at 7:30, and we've done that since COVID. So everyone knows, they don't have to think about it. They go into what we call the Blueberry, which is our sort of communal kitchen, and at 7:30 there's a fresh meal, and so everyone orients their evening around the 7:30 meal because that's where they can get fed. With low effort. And the second, which is recent now that we've had kids, is the kids all come from daycare at 5:30. And so, quote, baby happy hour is now an institution where at 5:30, you can go play around with some kids before they go to bed at 7. So it's really those 2 moments are the sort of skeleton of the day. And then outside of that, people are sort of coming and going at different times.
Well, I think we can start micro. I mean, I just want to follow up on what you just said about your schedule. But I think we can also expand this to what this means in terms of people who want to live near friends in their own setup, their own situation. But like, what do those shared, I guess, time frames, those common touch points do for you? What added value does that bring in your life and with your community that you wouldn't get necessarily just being on your own?
Well, I think a big one is actually just like the effortlessness of daily life. I think people have the misconception that if you like live with others and you need to sort of negotiate space and lifestyle with other people, then your life's gonna be harder than if you lived alone. But I think our experience is like, even for the people that have organized it, me and my wife, our life is easier. I haven't gone shopping or cooked a meal in years. It's because my friends cook it for me. And like, I do other stuff. I'm not a total freeloader. I think like the ease of life and like just like knowing that like someone's got you covered if you can't do the thing that day is really probably the big thing there. Then I also think there's just like you have a container that you can also bring other people in your world to. So I think another misconception I have is that if you live like this, you get very insular. But really, it's like I can invite friends over and host them with basically zero effort. I'm like, come to dinner. I don't have to cook it. You just show up. And there's sort of like this like dinner party waiting for you. There's like a dinner party every night that you don't have to organize. And so it means you can like bring other people and host other people in a much more sort of easy way.
So what kind of, I guess, people like your friends, does this lifestyle fit? Is this really for everyone, or is there a special type of person that just loves living with friends?
Yeah. So I do want to differentiate what we do, which is like a very maximalist version of this. We have the campus. Most people aren't going to live in that or build that. My wife and I are sort of outliers in that, like, it's what happens when like a real estate person, me, marries a behavioral scientist, her. Like we tend to do like big grand experiments. But I think for most people, what this typically looks like is they live like next door to like one friend or one family member. And it's not a grandiose thing you need to manage with LLCs and complicated financial structure. It's just like you're just near someone who is part of your support network. And I think that is probably for most people, right? Most people want some sort of local support structure. They want someone that can like take care of them. They want someone that can borrow sugar from. They want someone that can like watch their kid for 10 minutes. And so this like version of it that like you have like one or two people within Crocs distance of you is one that I think is like pretty, in my experience, like universally desired and applicable. There may be some people that don't want it, but like I think most people do. The version we do, which is this like 30-person compound thing, I think there's actually an appreciable number of people who do want that, and there's very few of them. The demand for people that want to like live here versus the number of spaces we have is like really disproportionate. But you know, it's probably not the majority of people want to live like we do. It's probably 10 or 15% of people.
You've said that living near friends is probably one of the best things you can do for your own life, quality of life, and your health and your happiness. Can you unpack that for us?
This is actually one that there's like a pretty good scientific study on. It's called the Framingham Heart Study. Have you ever heard of this?
It's new to me.
Okay. There's only a couple studies that have ever been done where they like really longitudinally track people over generations.
Is this the Harvard study of unhappiness?
That's basically the other one.
Okay.
So that's one of them. The other one's the Framingham Heart Study. So the town of Framingham, Massachusetts, they wanted to understand like what causes heart disease back in the 30s or 40s. I forget when they started this. And so they decided that they were going to basically measure every single thing that happened to every single person in this town over generations. Them, their kids, their grandkids. And so a bunch of interesting data came out of this. It was originally enough for heart disease research, but that's not the only thing they were able to look at. And what this study showed was that basically the biggest determinant of happiness they could find amongst the residents was, do you have a friend or a family member who's not your partner, who's not your significant other, within a walking distance of you? And if you have one person, I think it increased your happiness on average by 40%. The biggest determinant of happiness they could find amongst the residents was, do you have a friend or a family member who's not your partner, who's not your significant other, within a walking distance of you? And if you have one person, I think it increased your happiness on average by 40%, which is like, there's not that many things that increase your happiness by 40%.
Right. Yeah.
That's a big number. And so that's like one data point we have. But I think the mechanism for it is, it's a mood stabilizer, right? It's like You're in a bad mood, you can talk to someone. You're in a good mood, you can share it to someone. It's just like, I think you can just like avoid going into these like ruts when you have like someone who's not your partner, because you're not always, sometimes you'll have a little friction with your partner, right? Sometimes you need to get away from your partner to sort of like stabilize what's going on in your head.
Now, I feel like this idea of co-living has been growing for a while, but it's probably something that's happened in the past 5-6 years, especially around the pandemic, that I feel like has caused this concept to maybe become more popular or more attainable. Can you talk about some of the forces that are making people realize that living near friends is something that they should pursue?
So there's a couple things. So I think you're right about the pandemic. The pandemic was the moment that everyone simultaneously had the realization, had the feeling of I am so alone. We all had this like collective experience of like feeling deep loneliness and isolation.
I feel like we were collectively like we were all together alone.
Yes,
you know
exactly. If people talk about like when you live in Manhattan, you're surrounded by people yet alone,
right?
Like that feeling. I think we all have that, yeah. And so I think we all have that like collective cultural experience. And then it also like basically people were granted more flexibility in where they lived with remote work. And so it used to be like you're trying to optimize your best lifestyle. You probably move near your job because you got to commute every day. Actually, one of the things that comes out of the study is commuting is actually one of the biggest drags on your happiness. And so like it makes sense to like live near your work. If you don't live near your work anymore, you now need to decide a new criteria for how you select where you live. And our claim is like, why not near people you like? That could be a criteria used as your primary criteria if you no longer have to purely optimize around where your job is. So that's the second. I think it also coincides with people spending more time on their devices, feeling more lonely, and like, all these things are sort of coming together. I think there's an opportunity with remote work. There's an opportunity, which I'm sure we'll talk about given your guys' architecture background, with missing middle housing. So like the allowance to be able to build things you couldn't build before. And then there's sort of this like cultural, like, I think malaise that we're having. I think people are now like looking for different ways to live than they would.
I mean, let's head in that direction, right? I think this is sort of what we're getting to. If it's so desirable and it's so great for you, like why aren't more people doing it? What's the big barrier?
I think there's two big barriers. The first one is a real estate barrier. There are simply not real estate setups that are well set up for multiple parties who are friends and not strangers, right? So like when we build apartments on the assumption that these people are strangers. We want to minimize the interaction they're going to have with each other. Like, oh God, we have to share an elevator ride together. This is awkward. And that's it. And so, I sort of want to like pioneer like a category of housing that I would call like proximate housing, which is like housing that's actually designed for people that like want to have interactions at different levels. It doesn't mean you're sharing a bathroom or sharing a kitchen. No one wants to share a bathroom. We're not for sharing bathrooms.
Tell that to my architecture students.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to share a bathroom, but like no one wants to share a bathroom.
After college, I was done with that.
So I think there's this like missing housing type, and we basically see it with like a lot of our users. Like, I want to live near friends, but like, where's the housing that allows me to do that? Everything is sort of designed for strangers or designed for like atomic units. I'm sure we'll talk more about that first one. The second one I think is and my wife talks about this is a social script issue. So we live in a culture where we have certain scripts of ways we get to interact with people. And so a social script that we all have is when you go to a bar, it is like totally normal and expected that you might go up to a total stranger and ask them for their phone number. That is a social script that we have accepted in our society. You might not like that the person did that, but you're not surprised that happened. We do not have a social script for will you be my neighbor, and even the close friends of ours, right? That's sort of considered like a abnormal, awkward ask to make, and that's just a cultural shift that can happen over time, right? Like will you be on my podcast wasn't a social script that we had 5 years ago, but here we are doing that. Like these things can change, but I think it's probably the second big barrier is like this like scripting of what you can ask of the people around you.
Each week on Most Modern, we bring you another conversation and a different perspective on the built environment. If you enjoy these conversations as much as we do, please consider subscribing to the show. It'll help us reach more listeners like you.
Well, it's interesting because there is a famous individual who said, "Will you be my neighbor?" Mr. Rogers, right? And I'm talking about this seriously because I think when he was talking about it back in the day, he was more talking about how do you, be a good person, be a good neighbor, not physically living next to the other person. Walk us through live near friends, the enterprise, not the concept, and tell us how do you actually engage with people to bring them in to live near you or live with you?
We sort of try to address those two barriers. So like the social scripts barrier and the real estate barrier. The social scripts barrier is mostly addressed on the like case study, just show examples of people doing it, like normalize it, like get a bunch of stories out there of it. And like I'm old enough where I remember like it wasn't even common to like talk about like homosexuality, like culturally. Like Will and Grace was like a big landmark like show for this. And now it's so common we don't even like it's not even a thing you even think about. And a lot of that was just exposure. It's just exposure. It's just like seeing people who are publicly out of the closet like changes this. And so, that's sort of the cultural level we operate on. Then the real estate level is we're doing two things. Where we've sort of started as a company is trying to basically identify real estate in the wild that already exists, that's already been built. Then maybe it's not built for the purpose of like people living next to each other or like living multi-generationally, but could work for it. And so we essentially look at every listing on market and off market and basically have a team that goes through and says, could this work for people who know each other, who want to live near each other? And we have a real estate portal that you can find at our website where we essentially highlight the properties that we think work well for this that are in the wild.
Can we zoom in on that maybe a little bit? Like, what does that look like? Can you help us like walk through like an example of when that happened?
I'll give you a few archetypes. So archetype number one is a duplex or a triplex with a shared yard. And you need to be careful because in a lot of places that have rent control, if you buy a duplex, you can't actually live in it if you have tenants there who have rent rights. So part of it's actually interpreting the tenancy in the place and then tenancy rules in the place that say like, would this allow for the thing you want to do? But like a duplex and a triplex is like one. A second one is a single family home on a lot that is sufficiently large that you could build an ADU or you could subdivide and build additional units. And so it's understanding the local, essentially small scale missing middle development laws that might allow you to add density in the way that you could add an additional dwelling unit. And if you're a real estate professional, it's not that hard to interpret these things. If you're like a normal person who just wants to live near your friends, like you don't know anything about AD laws. You don't know how to like interpret like the zoning of the lot. And so we sort of try to like just like tee that up for people in a way where they can understand it. So those are sort of two common archetypes of like properties that will feature. A third one is actually like when multiple units are for rent or for sale in a single building. And it's just like understanding when that's happening. We've never seen any like 501 like apartment building operator ever tried to like bulk rent units before. And we think it's actually a great opportunity because like you and your friend rent in the same space. You don't need to get financially entangled to do that. It's just like you're both like renting two units. And then they've built out for you probably some like communal gym and like amenities that like you can basically use as your own like private stuff because no one uses amenities in these buildings. It's like if you get some friends in there, that's basically your like private rooftop deck on the top of that building. And we have friends like in New York who have taken over like half of a building. It's like their giant like mansion with all of their own units, and they all have these spaces they didn't have to build themselves.
Is there a certain target demographic that you think this model applies particularly well to?
Two demographics are the ones that we've seen show the most interest in this, and it is, I think, historically co-living companies, and we're not a co-living company. Co-living companies, I think, have focused on the needs of like 20-somethings in big cities. To me, this is not the demographic that needs this, right? They have a pretty social, connected life usually anyways, as a result of like where they are in the life stage. The two that really need it are people who are about to have families, who traditionally would be moving from a city where they're socially connected to a suburban house where all of a sudden they are totally isolated. We have a lot of people who are like seeing that future and saying, I don't want that. I may need to move to the suburbs for school reasons, for space reasons, but like I want to be moving with some sort of social structure around it and not just moving alone. The second one we see is, we're not supposed to call them empty nesters anymore. Apparently they're supposed to be called freebirders or freebirds. It's people who are basically 55 plus who kids are leaving the house, and they are now deciding like what I want the rest of my life to look like, and they want to age in place. I was talking to a woman today who who said this very nicely, where she's like, you know, the thing that everyone fears in the 55 plus category is dependence. It's like being in the nursing home, you're dependent. The thing that they talk about is independent living, which is you're not dependent. But she's like, that's not right either. What you actually want is interdependent living. You want like independence, but you want to have a social structure around you. That's really the thing that's going to keep you sort of healthy and happy as you're aging in place. And so I think this interdependent living is sort of in this segment is sort of the other group that I think is particularly interested in this sort of way of life.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I don't know how much we want to go into this, but you bring up how this is not co-living. And there was a moment, Lebo's former employer at WeWork was trying to promote things like living together, like you're saying, in dense, almost like dorm-like environments.
Yes.
How does this differ from that in specifically?
Lebo, was it We Live? Were you working on?
Yeah.
Nice. We Live didn't work. I don't want to say I could have told you that, but like my Monday morning quarterbacking of why We Live didn't work is two reasons. One is 20-something renters are a bad segment because they are high churn and low willingness to pay. You know, we work with people that can buy houses. It's a different segment of people. There's a better business opportunity there. The second is something I would say all the time at cul-de-sac when I was there, which is no one wants to be part of their landlord's community. No one likes their landlord. And it doesn't matter, you know, how well you brand it. Like, people just don't like their landlords. Like, landlords have the lowest like approval rating of like any. They're like down there with like cable operators and like insurance and like health insurance companies. They're
it's like a service provider almost, like a financial relationship. It's not like a social relationship.
Totally. So like, come be part of our cool, me the landlord again, and everyone together for the pizza party. Like, no, people don't want it. That's not cool. Our sort of vision for this is not the corporate landlord is going to like make the cool environment for you. It's like, no, this should be driven bottoms up by the people that are like living in these places in a real way, which means like they're going to create their own living situations. Like they're gonna build their garden. Like they're gonna own their thing. They're gonna create their community in the way they want to create it, and it's gonna come from them. And that's where the culture and the motivation and the like satisfaction is going to drive from. It's not a top down landlord provides you the service.
Yeah, well, I don't disagree. I was going to say one thing that happens as you get older is you decide which of your many friends that you would like to be neighbors. Whereas maybe when you were 20-something, everybody is a great neighbor. But I wanted to ask you about maybe the length of friendships of the groups that come to you and say, hey, we're ready to make this commitment. What does that average length of friendship look like?
This is something we actually work with people a lot on. People have this misconception that like they can only live near their best friend. And oftentimes, logistically, it just doesn't work out. The best friend's not in the same city. The timing doesn't work out. The life stage is different. The like whatever. Also, your best friend is not necessarily your best neighbor. Like those are different roles. And so what we try to get people to think about is like, who do you want as your neighbor? Not this needs to be this is not your best friend. This is not the person you're confide in, you know, everything. It's like, who's the person you want to occasionally have a beer with on Friday, watch each other's kids, borrow sugar from each other. And like, this thing happens actually when you have kids, which is like, you go to your like kids, friends, parents, all of a sudden become like your like social network. And it's like those are not your best friends, but they serve a really useful role in your life.
So what does the social script look like, right? Like, how do I ask, hey, like, I don't want to be best friends with you, but totally. I would love to have you as a neighbor as long as we don't see each other all the time.
You're my 12th best friend, and I think you'd be great now. Yeah. And it's like, you know, we tell people to talk to like 10 people. Like, talk to 10 people you might want to live near. Doesn't mean your best friend, but it should be starting with someone you know and like is probably a good place to start. Another good place to start is like friends who are moving to a city. So everyone's friends got a friend who's moving to the city. You love this person. They're cool. Like that person can make you a great neighbor. We see people self-organize, especially in like the older 55 plus crowd. You know, they'll like try to host like dinner parties where they're like, I want to live a certain way. Who else wants to live a certain way? Let's like just start hanging out and like having dinner together and having picnics together and like just see what transpires. So hosting this like routine dinner party is actually a very common way that like these sort of living situations materialize. It's actually how we started our first community. Is we just hosted a dinner party every month for like 6 months straight, and then like the people who were still around doing dishes 6 months later were like, they might be good people to live around, and then they became the basis of of our communities. So yeah, it does not have to be best friend. But I think we do need to like provide more ways for people to like expose that desire.
Basically just define live near friends with living in close proximity to somebody who's not your spouse, but could be a relative, could be a friend. This is not uncommon in other places around the world, in other countries and other cultures. What is it about the North American context that makes this so different?
The most common way you'll probably see this is extended families. So like immigrant families do this in the US. they'll get their big multi-generational compound. And so I think a lot of it stems from there. We just culturally, we all like to move out of our parents' house when we turn 18. I certainly did that. And so like culture matters. Like, I'm not proposing we like change that idea in America. I like that we have an independently minded culture here. But I think the form that this will take in the US will just like look different than other places. It's like the culture is different. So like the social structures around that is different.
And then on the market side, I mean, you're a real estate professional. You understand how the market works. What is it that is maybe a problem with the real estate market right now? I think we can all admit that housing is really expensive. It's very hard to buy a home, let alone make rent. What is it that I think Live Near Friends is responding to, and how do you think that can improve the situation for people?
Real estate is expensive, but coordination is free. How's that for a tagline? I've been trying that one out.
It's pretty good.
Okay, we'll workshop it. So there's a bit of, it's like, where are the deals in real estate? The deals are not in buying single family homes. Single family homes are really expensive as an asset class. Multifamily housing trades at, like in San Francisco, trades at like a 30% cost per square foot penalty relative to a single family home. So if you can make a multifamily building work for your lifestyle, you're paying 30% less for a home. For people that pay 50% of their income to their housing, which is average, that's the equivalent of getting a 15% pay raise, which might be your pay raises over the course of years. I think that like the savings of being able to utilize real estate, which is maybe less in demand from like a typical segment in this way, there are potentially big gains. I think the other big gain is actually how much space you need. My wife and I at Radish live in an 1,100 square foot apartment with 2 kids. It's tight. If we were living alone, we'd be living in a 2,000 square foot house because we would feel like we need that much space because we're living alone and we sort of need to like get away from each other and we need more stuff. But we can live in 1,100 square feet because we have a enormous yard, a hot tub, a sauna, a communal building with a co-working space and a lounge and a dining room. And so like we don't need a hosting space in our own home in our 1,100 square feet because we have lots of hosting space in our community. We don't need a guest room in our home because we have a dedicated guest room that we share in our community. And so it means we can live in a 1,100 square foot space instead of a 2,000 square foot space. And that means we're paying like half the cost of housing we'd be paying otherwise. And with sort of the same level of like creature comfort.
I'm curious about what are things that people think they can share but end up realizing they need on their own, or vice versa. Things that they thought they needed independently, but realized actually if I share this with a group of friends, it's even better.
Things you should never share. Bathrooms. Don't share a bathroom if you can. Washer dryers once you have kids. Yes, sorry, just want to like leave your crap in the dryer and not have to go get it for someone else. Things people can share. Guest room. People maintain guest rooms in their private homes for the one day a month somebody comes and visits. We have a dollop guest RV at Radish and a booking calendar. It's filled half the time. No one needs to have a guest room. Huge savings on space. Yards, gardens, hot tubs, saunas. These sort of things are good for sharing. You don't need your own yard. You might want like a space you can read outside that feels like it's private, but you don't need a yard to yourself. Just like you don't need a park to yourself.
You happen to be speaking to one of the earliest hot tub entrepreneurs that I know.
Who's that?
Famously, when we were in college, brought a hot tub into the dorm and had a lot of fun gatherings.
I can confirm that hot tubs are indeed very shareable.
Was this inflatable?
Yeah.
It was amazing. And it was the kind of thing that was like, yeah, it's like at the end of the week, we just all jump in the hot tub, get some beer and just hang out. It was great. So I think we stress test that option for you. Well, let's talk about the service itself. If someone out there is listening, they're like, this sounds interesting. I don't know if I'm ready to take the plunge. Maybe I want to live with my friend here, or I'm moving to a new environment where I want to, a new city or whatnot, and I want to maybe try this out. How would they start? How would they go through this process?
LiveNearFriends.com. We have different levels of services depending on where you are. So the first place that actually people usually start is our like case studies and informational resources. Just like who's doing this, how are they doing it, what does it look like, what do the homes look like, a little like Zillow porn of like, sort of living near friends. And then like financially and legally, how do people structure these things? So we have a lot of resources on Living Your Friends. We also have a companion blog called Super Nuclear on Substack, which has a lot more case studies on people sort of living in different ways than sort of is the norm. And then for people that are sort of in the cities where we cover, which right now are San Francisco and Seattle, and we're soon going to launch LA, Austin, Washington, D.C., maybe one or two more. This is where we go through and we actually hand select properties that we think are a good fit for friends and family to share. And so the way you interact with us are you go browse the properties, you find one you like, and then we have a network of basically service providers who specialize in working with groups on this sort of stuff. So we have realtors who do nothing all day long but work with people that want to buy homes with friends or family. And so your random Zillow, Redfin, whatever agent does not have experience doing this. They don't know how to like do multi-unit stuff. We sort of have specialists in this who know the financial stuff, who know the legal stuff around this, who know how like you get maximize a property for this. We would connect you to someone like that to work with if you actually want to buy a home. And then we also have development consultants, lawyers, lenders who sort of help people do this. Our business is essentially a referral business, but it's referral to a specialized group of service providers who help people do exactly this.
And if someone were to start into the process of looking for a home to live near their friends, how long does that take relative to the traditional home search living arrangement process?
There's sort of a pre-step, which is like, getting people on board, which takes anywhere from months to years. The actual home search piece of it, is I don't think any different. Typical person spends 3 to 6 months looking for a home. You'd find something similar if you're sort of looking for something that's, generally available in your city. Most of the work, sort of the pre-work of getting someone like interested in game for the idea and having the stars aligned to go do that.
So right now you're in 2 cities, right? In San Francisco and Seattle. So like, is most of your customer base like moving within the city, or have you started seeing like city hopping where a bunch of friends wanted to relocate somewhere and you help them find the relocation?
Yeah, good question. Most within the city is what we've seen. We have seen like friend A is in the city, friend B is moving to the city is a common configuration. Like that's when you can get your friends to move with you, is like when they're already moving. That's like striking when the iron's hot.
That's friction, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. My wife has a saying. We've probably recruited like 100 people into our various communities. Mainly, my wife is the salesperson. I'm more the back end sort of guy. But she has a saying called long game, which is she's like, I'm talking to someone when they're not ready, they don't have the situation, they can't do it, they can't afford it. But I'm talking to them like ahead of time, and like they will eventually have a moment when they have some sort of plasticity in their life. And if you are top of mind for them, if you've had multiple conversations with them, they will one day call you up and think of you. And we've had this happen with pretty much every close friend in our life. Has like maybe years after the initial conversation has like rung us up and been like, no, I'm ready. But it sort of takes like sort of just like throwing it out there.
On that topic, how flexible are some of these arrangements? Like if someone wanted to opt in to an existing community, how is that possible? Or if, for instance, life changes and someone wanted to...
Some people will like co-buy, in which case like they are committed to each other. They have a financial and legal relationship with each other that is like real, and they need to think about what the exit looks like, but they're like making a real commitment. The configuration that actually I think we see most often, that people actually I think sometimes don't consider, and you'll see this in like cities like San Francisco and Seattle and New York, and there's like the one friend or family member who has more financial resource than the other, or just the one person who just has more resource, and they're like, I want to use my resource to make a great life for myself and my friends. They will then, before having anyone signed up, like buy a multi-unit property or buy a home with a lot where they can like build another thing in the future. And they will say, I'm going to sit here and this will be a net that I'm going to catch people in my life with. And they will then rent to their friends, or they will rent to their family. They're going to basically like be the patron of their friend group, the patron of their family, and create a living situation that works for the people they care most about. So we see a lot of people do this thing where they're the owners, they're the decision makers. It's not complicated. It's just like, I'm going to rent to you, and I can either rent to you at market rate or I can rent to you at less than market rate. This is a pretty common thing we see. And I think more people who come into money, I think should think about this as a way to like deploy their money. Like people get money and I think they spend it on housing choices that don't make them happy, right? They're like, I got money, so I bought a bigger house. I bought money, so I got a fancier house. That's not going to make you happy. The thing that could make you more happy is I bought 2 houses, and now a person I really love deep, I have the option of moving someone I love deeply into that second home. That is much more bang for your buck.
I think that I heard that like Nvidia, the valuation is going way up right now, and it's putting like, I don't know, $15 billion into the Bay Area real estate market just based on all these people that are cashing their stock.
If you're in Nvidia, let's talk.
I think that's a good one to end up on, a call to action for all the Nvidia stockholders.
Jensen, are you listening?
I want to ask you a sort of larger question about the built environment, because I think this probably, just speaking with you, stems from a feeling about the way our cities, our communities are structured in America right now. Based on your experience working at a smaller scale, but a more manageable and kind of like an experimental scale with your own lifestyle, if cities were actually starting to design around more social connection instead of just automobiles and roads and highways, and more policy that made those connections make more sense instead of just like FAR and height limitations, what would that look like?
I think a lot of it's like, what's the thing you see when you walk out your door? The like median experience in America is you walk out your door, and your door is not a front door, it's a garage door, and you walk into your garage and into your car and you go somewhere. And the chances that you collide with anyone are pretty much zero. If the median experience is you walk out your front door into a place you might actually want to walk out of, and you're in an environment where you actually might want to be, the chances of collision all of a sudden go up dramatically. And so we've made policy choices over the last 50 to 100 years, which have made it extremely likely you walk out into that garage, and we made it extremely unlikely you walk out into a place that you actually want to walk out into. Some of it's the stuff you mentioned. A lot of it's like fire code stuff. It's a choice of what you want to incentivize. So right now we're actively incentivizing a form of development, which I think leads to isolation. We can do a lot better by just being neutral about it, right? If we're like neutral to the idea that this property is not going to need a vehicle, or like we're going to subdivide it in a way where like 2 people could live on it who know each other, then we're a lot better off where we are now. But like you could actually go the other direction and actually positively incentivize the thing. Like what would cause someone to want to plant a tree on their street? There's this article that went around this week in San Francisco, which is like there's some renegade person who's going around and making benches and putting them on the sidewalk. And the city's going around like whack-a-mole trying to like get rid of this guy's benches. I understand. But what is the city actually encouraging people to do with the street? It's like the city's encouraging them to park cars on the street, not put benches on the street. They're actually discouraging that. And so like you can imagine a set of policies and a culture where like the improvement of the streetscape is the thing that is encouraged as opposed to the opposite, which is the degradation of the streetscape, which is what we encourage.
And how do we get there? How do we make that happen?
I don't know. Do you guys know?
Well, I mean, I think part of it is raising the question, right? Like so much of this is just a given. If you grow up in America, you have that life experience. You don't question it. And I think what I'm interested with Live Near Friends is it changes the paradigm a little bit in a way that's still feasible, in a way that's sort of, it makes sense. And, unless you have the ability and the privilege of being able to travel to other places and be exposed to different lifestyles and different urban design, you're probably not going to question that in the first place. So I think part of it is just raising awareness of what those possibilities are, and then understanding it's going to be a negotiation. There are reasons why we do need roads. There are reasons why we do need setbacks and all these sorts of things. But understanding that city and urban design has always been a conversation and a contestation to a certain extent about competing agendas. And I think if we can streamline those agendas and get people on the same page, that's the way we do it.
Here's actually one thought. This woman, Kelsey Piper, wrote a really good thread on this. Let's go dig up. But I think what's essentially happened in the world of real estate development is that most real estate development in cities sort of happens institutionally, right? It's like you have institutional developers or institutional capital that is like not from that city. It comes from New York City, from some bankers. And like, I'm not saying this as like bleeding heart person. Like I'm a capitalist. But I think our cities would be better if we can get to a place where the normal citizens of the city were able and capable of making their mark on their neighborhoods, because they know the local context, right? They also have the passion, right? I'll tell you the way that I think is the case is like the only way in which you can actually build something in your city is you essentially need to become a real estate expert, to build anything in your city. I am a literal real estate developer. I'm in this building right now. It's an ADU we built here in Oakland. It was really difficult for me to build this ADU. I am a professional real estate developer. It was extremely hard.
Yeah, tell me about it.
I got blindsided by the utility companies where like we had like $50,000 of excess utility expense we weren't expecting. I am a professional real estate developer. A normal person gets hit by $50K of extra expense they weren't expecting. It bankrupts them, right? And so the average story of someone trying to make their mark on their city is PG&E charged me an extra $50K, and now literally I am bankrupt. Are any of their neighbors going to try to build anything where they are? Of course not, right? And all you get from the city is, well, you didn't read section 14.5C of the code that said this and this and this, you idiot. Is this an environment that's going to cause anyone to want to build anything who is actually local to a place? Of course not. It's all professionalized because we made it professionalized. We made it only accessible to professionals. And only accessible to professionals at really high risk profiles. And so a thing I would do if I was a city, and I actually wanted the like local populace to like leave a mark on the city, is I would change my outlook to like, we are a bunch of lawyers interpreting the code, which is essentially you talk to like someone in the planning department, they're essentially a lawyer. They're like, here's the code, here's what we're trying to do. Let me look at all the reasons you can't do your thing. What if that person had much more of like a customer success mentality, which is like, ooh, a citizen in my city wants to give something to my city and make it their own in some way. How can I make them successful in doing that thing? It would be a total cultural shift in how these places operate to do that. And I've never felt this from the city or planning department, right? It's all like if you try to build something, essentially the reaction you get from them is like, you're being a naughty boy trying to build something.
Yeah,
it's
what
like,
are you doing
please
here?
don't do this. What are you doing here? And it sucks. And it makes our cities crap.
I'll give you a counterexample. My wife is from New Zealand. We do speculative development in New Zealand, and I can call them up from California to the planning department there, and they are the most helpful person ever. Like, it's the best, it's like customer service in your sense, like trying to help people get this stuff done. Because I think, one, it's a different culture with a different level of trust and whatnot, but there is just a different mentality around it. And I think if you also read the material on the planning department's website, it is not opaque. It is supposed to be transparent. It's supposed to be accessible. Versus in America, I think we can all agree that most of our life and a lot of our work is dictated by the pen. It's like, how do we bureaucratize something to make sure that we don't get sued, we reduce risk, everything is clear. And of course, you need that to a certain extent to make sure that cities operate efficiently and properly. But you can't get it to the point where you can't do anything. And I think we're in a moment probably right now. I mean, just in terms of single stair buildings, in terms of reducing permitting costs and timelines, adding shot clocks to make sure that when you put something in front of the planner, that they actually respond to you within your lifetime. Like all these sorts of things, I think we're moving towards that. So I do think that it's like there's a lot of micro changes that need to occur, but I think also like big projects need to happen, like what you're doing, like large things to demonstrate the success and viability of these things for the market and for the culture.
My last company was that helps ours Cul-de-sac, which is doing car-free walkable neighborhoods in the US. To sort of like beat up on one jurisdiction and complement another one. So cul-de-sac was basically needed essentially this huge variance to happen. It was a car-free community, and like that has close to 800 units, which is like, not something that any like code would provide for by right. And so you essentially need the city support to make something happen like that. And we would talk to different jurisdictions about building things like this, and we didn't actually talk to anyone in California because we sort of knew that wouldn't work. Tempe, Arizona, where we ended up building the first one, the meeting was so refreshing because we get in there and it's like we were having the conversation at the level of like, what are your goals for the city, and is the thing we're trying to do helping in your goals as a city or not? So they wanted economic development, they wanted environmental sustainability, and like I'm like, okay, we can deliver these things with this thing we're building. And we got to have the conversation on the level of like, what are the city's goals and how does the thing we're doing achieve the goals? Whereas if you go to like California, let's just beat up on them some more, there's no discernible goal. It's just like a thicket of code. And if you go to them, and I remember having this experience when we first tried to do Radish, we like sat down with the planner, we're like, okay, like, do you want more units? And they're like, no. We're like, do you want fewer units? We can take away units. Like, no. It's like, what do you want? Like, there's no actual, like, the city doesn't have an objective.
Doesn't have a direction.
And so you can't actually have a conversation with them. So I like a system where you can like engage on objectives and propose something that meets an objective. And then, you know, I don't want to beat up on the city officials too much. Like, they're constrained in 100 different ways, but it's like you give them the discretion to decide whether your thing meets the objective or doesn't meet the objective, which right now they don't have the discretion. They just have to follow the code. To me, that's something that would create a better city, is a system that looks like that. The more discretion in the planning department, even at the risk of like unfairness. So with more discretion comes unfairness, right? Because they're going to favor things. I think we need to move maybe in that direction of trade-offs rather than the current direction of trade-offs, which is everything's fair, but it sucks, which is where we are right now.
I love this conversation. I've recently argued that a city like San Francisco needs to have a population target. You know, we say we need more housing, but for how many people? Then you can say, okay, we should build the 20-story building instead of the 10-story building, instead of the single family building. I think it's a matter of leadership. I think sometimes politics gets in the way. And to counterpoint to you, I do think people have a way to shape and form what goes on around them. But they only have one choice, which is to say no. And they can say, no, that can't be here. No, this can't be erected. This can't happen. And we don't have a lot of mechanisms to say yes as individuals. And I think that's really unfortunate.
Yes, that's right. I would love to see like a neighborhood REITs form where it's like the people are in the neighborhood get to actually be like investors in the neighborhood and get to see something on the upside of what's developed, and the REIT can invest in things and have an opinion on what gets built. That's actually a business idea I was playing around with a while ago. They never did. But if somebody's listening to this and wants to do that one, I'd love to support you.
Well, I think there's ways now. I mean, with technology and ways to communicate, you know, like Reddit boards and forums, and that's how people connect these days in the neighborhood. And I think there's a lot of discussion that actually happens. And people, I'm always surprised talking to, maybe I shouldn't be, but talking to non-architects, non-designers, like people care about where they live. They care about public transportation. They care about their built environment. They care about their neighborhood. And I think it's like, we just have to start to, you know, continue to find ways to make that both, you know, towards certain values, but also feasible and whatnot. And I think that's where people who have real estate expertise and understand the logic and the mechanisms and what can be adjusted and what can be shifted around, that's where, you know, that can help quite a lot.
Yeah, I think it's right. We're not harnessing people's energies. Like, we're not harnessing like local energy to make the place they build better. And so people direct that energy inside their four walls, right? Mm-hmm. They'll renovate their kitchen. They won't renovate the sidewalk. It's because one of those we made easy and one of those we made hard.
Well, Phil, it's been a wonderful conversation. As always, we're going to finish on our final question, which is, if we were to look back on this current moment from some time in the future, how would we describe it?
So I once wrote an essay on this, which no one seemed to like, but I'm just going to try it again. Let's see if it works better audio-wise. I labeled the dizziness because there's this quote from Kierkegaard where he says, "Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom." And I think that like quote like really describes our era, which is actually like we have so many more degrees of freedom than we used to in the past, right? It's remote work. We can live anywhere. We can have any job. We can, you know, AI can help us do anything we want to do and learn anything we want to learn. Like there's these insane degrees of freedom we have in our life that like our grandparents like would never have even dreamed of. But I think with it just come like a lot of anxiety, and people are overwhelmed by it. They need like anchor points. They need like something they can like hold on to. And you know, and I think our neighborhoods, I think, could be things that do this. I think they're it's not working right now. It's failing us, but they could be. You know, ultimately, like why I care about the built environment is I think it could be like a real anchor for the anxiety of the age. It's like it's something to grasp onto and hold on to.
No, it's a fantastic notion, and I definitely sympathize. I mean, there's so many things that one can do with their time and their energy, and I think it's being able to focus on places, especially physical things. I think that's quite healthy. Well, thank you, Phil, for joining us on Most Modern. If people want to reach out to you, if they want to learn more about Live Near Friends, where should they go?
livenearfriends.com. We also have TikTok, Instagram, all the things. Yeah, would love to chat to you. Check out Super Nuclear. It's our Substack where we feature a lot of good stories around people doing this stuff as well.
Wonderful. Well, I hope that more people can find ways to live near people that they like and have better and healthier lives. So thank you for joining us.
Hey, thanks, guys. This was fun.
Most modern.
Most modern.
Most modern.
Most modern.
모스트 포던 팟캐스트